There's a quote from Jeff Yass. The biggest risk is that you have a losing strategy when you think you have a winning one. And that's what gets really worrisome about how you might use AI as a product manager. If you ask AI to create stuff for you, it's going to create stuff that looks like it's good, but might not be. That's the problem with AI.
And that's the problem with AI. Count cash while the soul's left dry. John and Scott, they be testing the why. Corporate takeover, they just can't lie.
We are going to kick this off. I'll give a little bit of a preamble, little introduction to who I am, and we're going to let Scott do the same, and then we're going to delve straight into the problem with AI, a recurring series where we tackle some of those issues that organizations and individuals are facing with AI. Some of it's misconception, some of it's just misappropriation of the technology, and a lot of it is just a lack of knowledge around what we're doing. So for my background, especially related to AI, I've been using AI since the rudimentary machine learning things of the 20-aughts, 2010s. Most of that back then was geospatial. It was imagery sort of stuff, analytics stuff. Generative AI, I think, a little bit new for all of us, the current generations, but since it became a thing, whether that was Midjourney or DALL-E or the different LLMs that are out, I've been using it, integrate it fully with my own company, and I've been helping customers do their strategy, their enterprise sort of stuff with AI. So I love the topic, and I love talking about how it becomes a train wreck, because a lot of people are rushing to adopt the technology without the full foresight of what that takes. And Mr. Scott Sehlhorst is a product guru, and he also has a history with AI. So Scott, would you like to introduce yourself to the crowd?
Hey, John, thanks. And hey, everybody. So I'm Scott Sehlhorst, product management and strategy consultant. Been doing it for a couple decades. I was a narrow AI programmer and consultant for several years before that, and an electromechanical design engineer focusing on systems and controls for almost a decade before that. So like I've kind of bounced around between the product space and the systems engineering space and gone back and forth. Most recently, I've focused on helping companies make better choices about what to get better at or how to get better.
I want to delve straight in. We called this one the problem with AI, product and process. And you and I have talked about this for the past many months. You've seen kind of my journey working with customers on use cases. You've heard me grumble about how poorly AI is understood and how to help. I'm going to kind of give you an open shot to get started with AI, with product. What's the top thing on your mind when we think of AI in the product space?
Yeah, so great question. I think let's see what direction this conversation goes. I think one of the structural challenges that we have as people, whether or not it's AI, is that the way we approach making things better. When I was still a mechanical engineer and we talked about process reengineering and process improvement, what I found was most of the efforts and most of the attention and interest wasn't on process reengineering, it was on procedure reengineering. It was the pave the cow path type stuff, where this is how we do things. Let's keep doing it, but let's make it a little bit better in some way, instead of thinking about what are we trying to accomplish by doing things this way? And is there a radically different approach we can take? And that mindset shift, right? I mean, back in the day, people talked about it as being outside the box. And I'm like, well, maybe you were in the wrong box. When we think about the rapid pace of change of enabling capabilities like AI, if we constrain our headspace into this procedure reengineering, incremental improvement mindset, I think we miss out on a whole bunch of stuff. So that's like a first principles anchor for how easy it is to fail to take advantage of AI or misuse it or throw it at the wrong problems.
We see a lot of that, whether it's new tech or new approaches, or somebody writes a book and it becomes a solution to everything. You know, the whole world looks like a nail if you just bought a brand new shiny hammer kind of effect. With AI in the product space, I am seeing everything from here's your product manager bot that will write all of your requirements for you, to let's just eliminate the concept of a bot and just have it pre-populate what your product strategy is. And some of it is smart and ties to financial, and others just kind of shiny new tech taken over for the product people. And I especially see that in IT organizations, which are sometimes order taker orgs, but they've also got, key functionality. They need to think about market presence and stuff like that. What are the stumbling blocks you're seeing to kind of that approach? It's almost a shotgun approach to let's replace product with generative AI, or at least outsource the thinking part.
Yeah. So one of the big challenges with that headspace is thinking about strategy development as something that happens inside a black box, or as I mix metaphors, something that gets done by somebody else and thrown over the wall. So whether you have some tool, and I think the problem gets exacerbated if you had a tool generate an AI strategy for you or a product strategy for you, because most of what we end up executing on doesn't get used in these command and control, hierarchical, dictate, linear sequence processes. We have the research that tells us 80% of products fail, 80% of features don't get used. Like, it's a Pareto principle thing that's just sort of played out in the data. My conclusion from looking at that is we're running in the wrong direction. We're chasing the wrong rabbit. The idea at the beginning was wrong, and we don't know what's wrong about it. And when that creation of the wrong idea happens inside that black box, and then we just execute around, there is no mechanism for discovering what was wrong about the idea, right? If it's 80-20, then part of the idea was still good, right? And it looked good and it resonated. We didn't know we were wrong. And so there's no opportunity to go learn back. And this, even without AI, this is a problem in a throw it over the wall mindset, because the people doing the work, doing the exploration, doing the discovery, running the experiments, getting feedback from customers are the ones who realize that something's off. And if you're executing against a plan that was generated by an AI inside that black box and thrown over the wall, there's no one to go back to and say, hey, this isn't working. You prevent the possibility of having a feedback loop if you run against something structured like that, because there's no one to talk to.
I talked with a company recently, and they have an AI suite that does some kind of survey response stuff. They were working with a very large coffee chain on their annual customer surveys. And basically, they survey all of their people coming through the door. They get feedback, they get demographic information, and they know how to adjust their product line. They know how to adjust their offerings, their seasonal things. What they had done is started to replace that survey with an AI model that represented those demographics and gave what approximate answers would be. They found the accuracy was surprisingly similar. They ran it side by side. Survey of real humans, survey with the AI model pretending to do the survey and coming back with the same demographic information. And it almost matched one for one. People might say that's a better, quicker, cheaper, more efficient way to get feedback. Just have the AI model the human behavior and give us what it would believe based on known facts. What do you think about that?
I think that's a really valid approach, and the question becomes, how do you use it? There is some research that, not HBR, but Harvard Business put out an analysis of some AI-driven research. So this is in the generative AI and the large language model space, right? Surveying the field of what people are sharing online, and then using that data set to train the AI to respond as if it were a potential consumer in a profile, in a context, like somebody that you might go target and survey to learn something. And so part of this is survey design, but part of it is what's really interesting. And one of the things we know in the product space from the way we design surveys and the kinds of questions we ask is that expressed preferences are not particularly trustworthy. Like, if you say, what would you be willing to pay for a new car? You can't trust the response, because people are going to try and think. People are smart, right? So they jump in their head and they're like, what are you going to do with my answer? Let me give you a lowball number so that maybe you set the price on this product I really want so that I get a huge deal, instead of giving you a piece of feedback that tells you what's the highest price I'm willing to pay, but I'll still pay it, right? Like the kind of dialogue that you get in expressed preferences, and that's just an easy example, isn't trustworthy. However, information from a survey or research point of view around demonstrated preferences is highly predictive. And what what the researchers figured out, and it was in the source of this paper, and if we have a place to share links afterwards on this, I'll find it and we'll post it, is that the data used to train that model is predominantly demonstrated preference, because people don't go post something on social media or their blog or respond in a product review or whatever and say, this is what I would be happy to pay. What they say is, this is what I paid. And so the data that trained the AI was demonstrated preference data. And so the generated results had a high correlation within the bounds of this research study with customer behavior. So you get a credible signal. Now, personally, and I think this is some of what Nate Silver calls the village of risk aversion versus the river of risk dominance. Like, just a sort of mindset for me is, I want to think about that quick and easy. We can unpack this, but once it already exists, the quick and easy use of this is a good calibration. Like, let's run an experiment and see if we're in a ballpark, and then let's refine that and improve our confidence in the data. And so you have the opportunity, it's just like the incremental funding models that we talk about, to spend a little bit right now to massively de-risk the potential spending in an exploration in the future, and use that to course correct and short circuit a bunch of bad ideas by discovering that they're bad ideas before you put a lot of time and energy into it. So it's a cost savings and an opportunity cost savings. So I think there's a there, and our ability to take advantage of it is going to come back to some of the product principles, like the conversations we've had before around survey design. How do you structure and ask the right questions in the right context? It's more than just training in prompt engineering. It's also understanding genuine survey design. Not just, you have to do both now. Like, to take advantage of this, you need to be able to guide technology to do what you want, but you have to guide your own thinking to ask for what you actually want.
I think we run the risk of, like, the multiplicity effect, right? Or the Xerox effect. When we're getting our feedback through simulated interactions with humans, it's probably pretty accurate right now. How many cycles can you go away from the actual human interaction before you're just getting a feedback loop of AI on itself, right? So if we're setting a product strategy using AI, what it's learned historically, and it's trending and it's pretty accurate matching with the surveys we can run and get actual field results from people. If you do that today, if you're not giving that human input over time, what the AI believes and what the actual humans believe are going to drift. So you've got to rebaseline. A common problem with AI is the drift. And especially in self-training or self-reinforcing models, that drift just is almost exponential and how quickly it goes off the rails. I think one of the problems I see with all this, whether it's marketing, sales, or product in that domain, which I consider all kind of in the product ops domain, when you start to let AI make the decisions, measure the outcomes, and then even help you write the strategy, you start to amplify that loop, and you start to lose a certain human element. The jury's out on how much of that human element we need, other than it's essential. But I'm very cautious when an org starts shifting a lot of that decision-making to the AI or relying too heavily on it without having that good human in the middle interpretation, without having the good human customer feedback stuff. Do you have any fears of us losing sight of our customers behind a wall of AI data?
In terms of losing sight of the customer, there are so many companies that don't have sight of the customer right now. And so it's not like they're losing it. If anything, what we're doing is running the risk of making it harder for them to transition into seeing the customer. And that's what I would worry about, because we enable some, maybe by metaphor, it's easier to read a magazine than to read a book, and it's easier to read a blog post than it is to read a magazine. We will consume these low friction, small barrier to entry pieces of content because they give us a shorter cycle to the dopamine reaction of whatever we're trying to pursue. Like, it's just psychologically, it's a general pattern. And if somebody who doesn't understand their customers, but knows that they need to understand their customers, sees the junk food equivalent of, well, you can just ask this AI, who we assert represents your customers, a question, and you don't have to talk to people. You don't have to learn how to talk to people. You don't need to manage the timing and all the challenges of missetting expectations or whatever. Like there's a whole bunch of craft in learning about your customers that people might see the opportunity to, I can avoid all of that. And I think they'll get themselves in trouble. But most companies aren't, or I don't know that I can say it about most companies. Most of the teams that I've worked with are decoupled from their customers when I show up on day one, and they're executing against something that isn't direct customer interaction, that isn't direct feedback loops, that isn't experimentation in a learning model. It is, let's run as fast as we can, and all of the pressure is to get faster at running, and not let's follow the path that yields the best results. So I worry that AI is going to make it harder to get those people off of that path.
You're not wrong. When I show up a lot of teams, even today, which is a sad state of affairs, they're so disconnected from their customer, whether it's an internal customer, a system as a customer, an external market customer. They can't even define it. They don't have a stakeholder map. They don't have customer levels and things like that. They don't know how to think in those terms because they've never been taught. It's not the team's fault, obviously. It's kind of a system thing. We were talking just earlier about how the business processes we have and the product management processes we have evolved from a need, right? Early on, a lot of our organization came from really big projects, the Hoover Dam, the Manhattan Project, like things we do in business are from really big human endeavors that were hard to organize. So we structured it, we put process. And that was more keeping the work organized and not a focus on the human. The human was kind of a thing we had to manage to make sure the work got done. Over the past couple of decades, focus became with Agile, let's put the human back in the mix. Let's focus on making their work better. Let's improve the processes to where it's not a stage gate to human creativity. It's something that supports it. Now we've got AI coming in. And people are hearing things like, let's take down all the Agile stuff. We're doing AI now, which blows my mind because AI is a great extension of kind of the Agile movement. Or we need to reevaluate every process we have and start from scratch because new technology, right? That pendulum has swung. We swung it over to the human side, and we're at a pretty critical time on whether we keep it going or whether it falls back. How are you thinking about and viewing those things? And especially I see the product space in threat with a lot of what I consider very advanced automation coming in, and it gets to the decision-making thing, replacing the humans there. On that whole pendulum swing from control the people in the work to empower the people, are we moving towards empower the AI? Like what are we moving towards?
I don't know what we're moving towards. I wish I did, but I think there are a couple forces that we can see that bias us towards different outcomes. And one of the challenges, like you talked about Agile and AI sort of competing for what is the corporate initiative. And I've found that leaders have a limited cognitive capacity for the initiatives that they can focus on. And this is organizational more than it is an individual's person to have 10 thoughts in their head at the same time. Shifting from the way Agile ended up playing out, unfortunately, wasn't how do we move quickly with tight feedback loops and increment and iterate. It instead became how do we improve our process so that we can run faster in whatever direction we were trying to go in. So it just played out in a way that was unfortunate. And now AI coming in and grabbing the headspace of this is what we need to change about ourselves from a leadership point of view of saying, what are our competitive threats? What are our market opportunities? What are our changes in customer expectation? The AI is consuming a lot of the capacity that was allocated to how do we get better in order to do the things that we need to be better at. And so it's filling that space. I don't know if it's going to overindulge so that we do less market sensing, we do less customer engagement, we do less competitive interpretation, and focus on the what can we build, not what should we build. I don't know if it's going to shift us that way. I think in organizations, it depends on who's driving those discussions. Like, is it an inside out tech first, customer second company? And the person with the juice in that context happens to be particularly enamored with AI? Or is it a business first? Like the conversation was always, IBM is not a tech company, even though they sell computers. They're a business company because they're solving problems. They happen to use computers to do it, right? They had this outside in approach to sales and solution selling that in a company that has that outside in view, it's a secondary question of what can we get better at that is subordinate to what do we need to be better at. And in those environments, I don't know that AI is going to displace because that's not the leader driving the conversation.
A lot of the conversations I've had lately with enterprises trying to get their head around how can AI help. Organizations are getting sued because they roll out AI in places they shouldn't. Car dealerships with the bot making deals that it's not allowed to make. State of New York got sued. Air Canada got sued. Big places are pulling back their AI initiatives because they took the approach of, let's replace an entire function of our business with this AI thing that's not ready yet. It's just not ready for facing the public. And we kind of see it in two ways. Customer service is a prime target, so they replace it with an outward-facing bot that will sell, beg, borrow, steal, it'll lie, it'll do whatever it does. And on the other side, we're starting to replace human resources. There are companies that the job description is defined, the post is made, the candidates are screened, the feedback is received, and that's all done by an AI. And it's no wonder we're getting very biased sort of job selection criteria. We're getting results that lead to not only people getting sued, but legislation to counter it because companies are approaching it wrong. I feel like in my response to all that's been, we use our agile muscle memory, or at least our good business development sort of muscle memory, the stuff that we know well. You build the right use case. You augment where you need to augment. And AI is a superior tool for many things, but for replacing humans, it's very poor, at least right now. Maybe once we get quantum and we've unleashed the full power of AI, we'll be there. But right now, my caution to business is do your journeys, your user journeys for your employees. Figure out their workflows, augment the things that need to be augmented, speed them up and support them, but focus on the human in the middle. I see a lot of that same stab at customer service failing and HR failing, and then it's pivoting to, well, if it fails facing the customer, let's turn it inward and have AI define our strategy. They don't say AI is going to define their strategy. They just start acting like that. And it's very attractive when you can talk to this very intelligent thing and get the answer you want, written in the words you want. It's really easy to fire that email off, put that slide deck together, all that sort of stuff. My hypothesis is we should be building on what we do well already, which we've got well-defined ways to do product, well-defined ways to do business that we can accelerate and advance with AI. We shouldn't be throwing it all out and trying to replace entire functions and entire knowledge domains with AI, especially when it's so immature right now, at least the generative AI stuff that we've gotten to. I don't know if there's a question from that, but I'd love your thoughts on it, on businesses that are taking out pillars, not only of their functional pillars, but their knowledge space, and they're outsourcing to AI.
There's a difference between something that looks like it's right and something that's actually right. Right? Think psychologically about all the things that we've evolved in our brains to be able to discern if something's a good idea or not, if something's a threat or not, if something's coherent or not. Right? We just evolved that sort of pattern of, it's almost like the thinking fast, thinking slow. Thinking fast, I can look at something and go, yep, okay, that seems right. It smells right. It's got the right structure and context. It's well-formed. This must be a coherent argument or a well-defined problem statement or a coherent user story, like initializing a backlog with something that's generated and using that as a foundation for, and what do we do with it? The worry that I have is that we don't have the level of capability as humans that we need to look at something that passes all of the checklist tests for appearing to be good, but actually isn't good. I've been toying with a 2x2 of good versus bad and right versus wrong as a way to think about it of does it match the syntax? Does it go against a set of observable criteria like a checklist? Those are the things that are right. And that's the kind of stuff that current generation Gen AI tools are really good at doing. And we can observe and give feedback and train, and we can evolve our prompt engineering so that the output has the right structure and appears to be good. And I believe that results psychologically in a misappropriation of the idea that it is actually good because it is well structured. And so bad ideas get into the mix because we don't have the signals that we've relied upon to tell us that bad ideas are bad, because historically the bad ideas have been sloppy thinking combines with sloppy execution because they came from a sloppy source. And so we would look for these signals that say, it's a bad idea. Let's fix it or cull it. And those signals go away in terms of the existing guardrails of human interaction. So I am really worried that it can exacerbate the idea of building the wrong things. We build the wrong things today because we have this inside-out mindset and we start with bad ideas and we execute on them. Now, even with some of the guardrails that we've put in place, bad ideas can sail right through because they came wrapped in a good idea box. They look like good ideas, and we don't know that they're bad ideas, and we don't think about doing it. One of the things that I've learned is that people put up guardrails, right, intentional policies, and then humans discover, or situations uncover, the loopholes, right? That initial policy was not fully exhaustive. There's some way around it. And so you evolve the policy. Like you could have a speed limit that says speed limit is 35. And you're like, what? But wait, there's a school on this road. 35 is not a safe speed when the kids are out. So, okay, 35, except it's 20 between the hours of 7 a.m. and 5 p.m. And you're like, well, wait a second, but that's inefficient because the kids aren't out between 9 and 2. So now the constraint evolves into being it's 35, except between the hours of 7 and 9 and the hours of 2 and 5. And between 9 and 2, it's 35 again. And then you can say, but what about the weekends? Like you progressively make your constraint more and more complicated. And I think that pattern is starting to evolve when we look at the different Gen AI tools. When we look at Gemini, ChatGPT, Claude, whomever, the different tools are being built and they're adding different guardrails. The focus seems to be on how do we avoid hallucinations, which is another different problem of how do we stop lying? And so they're building guardrails in there, but the tool is going to keep hallucinating. It's just going to hallucinate around the structure of that policy. And we won't know it was wrong until we accidentally discover that it was wrong because we're suffering the consequences of relying on something to be right and then finding out it's wrong. It's super worrisome. I don't know what we need to do to evolve how we collaborate as guardrails to catch the bad ideas that sneak through because they look like good ideas.
We'll let the silence linger for a moment on that deep thought. All right, silence is over. Moving on to something much less draconian, Scott, I want to wrap up on more of a lighter note. There are positives, and people are seeing like good uses, especially in the product space. As we evolve our product approach, our process approach, and we start thinking in terms of AI's here forever and it's not going away, just like the internet was here forever the day it became, ubiquitous across the world. What are some things your product professionals out there or business leaders out there can start thinking of? How would you start to think about where I can use AI or how I can start to position for it?
So for me, the first thing is leveraging what AI makes possible to change how you do your work today. And what I mean by that, so I have a workshop I run for clients around building an experiment backlog. And if I start with the end and work backwards from that, it's how do I know what experiment I need to run first or next? And uncovering the sources of jeopardy in your product plan, the things where you're most likely to be wrong and where it undermines your plan or hurts the most if you are wrong. And using that as the source of, okay, this is the experiment that's most important to run next. It's leveraging Doug Hubbard's How to Measure Anything and the Value of Information as a pattern for driving your discovery efforts. So you work backward, okay, sources of jeopardy in my plan, let me articulate my plan, let me understand the causation and the models, the hypotheses I'm developing. So you work through that approach to say, here is our approach to, one, improve our critical thinking so we develop a better plan in the first place, and two, enable us to improve the plan in parallel with executing the plan. That's just a fundamental organizational shift of something you need to do. When you look at the barriers that make that hard for someone to do, it's around the cost of research, the cost in dollars and time of running experiments. It almost becomes why do I get in this mindset if I can't actually effectively run experiments? Because the organization, when they're doing their funding, when they're building their road mapping or whatever, either explicitly occasionally or implicitly most of the time, they're managing the risk of being wrong against the risk of being late. And the risk of being late is something that's really concrete and obvious, right? Even in the absence of the kinds of feedback loops that as product people make us a learning organization, the risk of being late is really concrete, and you feel it and you expect it, and you get pressures from other parts of the organization, your leadership or whatever. All of the pressure is on faster. At the time when it matters, the pressure isn't on, is that a good idea? And so people are balancing the risk of being wrong with the risk of being late in a way that is appropriate, right? So that's all really valid, but the calculus of what do you do about it against whatever ratio you happen to have, part of what you operationally do is a function of what is the cost in dollars and time of doing it. So build this experiment backlog, great. That's a methodology, it's a skill, it's a practice. You can drop in, teach a team how to do it, and they're like, okay, now we know how to do it. What are we going to do with it? Well, we can leverage AI to make that not be prohibitively expensive in time or dollars. We can take advantage of the ability to de-risk the risk of wrong without as significant of an offsetting increase in the risk of being late. And so that dynamic shifting, I think, is what can we do right now with the current tech we have right now that puts us in a better space. And it puts us in a better space because it's becoming possible to be the way we know we need to be as an organization from a product thinking or a product ops point of view.
As always, Scott, very insightful.
Thanks, John. There's definitely more to say on this for sure.
Always a pleasure, buddy, and we'll be talking much more about this topic. Thank you for joining us on the first inaugural, and I will go ahead and say pilot episode of The Problem with AI. You may have noticed a few sound quality issues throughout this episode. Don't worry, we're working to get those fixed before the next one. If you liked what you heard and you want to hear more from us, check us out at theproblemwithai.com. We hope to see you there. And with that, we're going to leave you with this week's 100% AI-generated theme song. Enjoy.
Podcast wheels turning, John and Scott in the booth discussing AI trouble, spitting nothing but the truth. Machines gone wild, taking over our biz. Brains with silicone, yo, that's what the problem is. Algorithms tripping, numbers flying high, investors getting shady, watching profits sky. Human touch missing, no one left to talk. Data points glitching, yeah, now who's the boss? And that's the problem with AI. Count cash while the soul's left dry. John and Scott, they be testing the why. Corporate takeover, they just can't lie. Machine learning errors causes bloody stacks. Autonomous choices sliding through the cracks. Workforce replaced, folks out on the street. AI taking jobs, the cycle's complete. AI precision, but hearts getting cold. Human empathy's worth way more than gold. John and Scott echo through the sound. Artificial rain, kingdoms getting crowned. And that's the problem with AI. Count cash while the soul's left dry. John and Scott, they be testing the why. Corporate takeover, they just can't lie.